Welcome to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and their journey. Now, let's get started with the show.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Luke Komiskey of DataDrive.com. Luke, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out of the podcast. Since Luke is actually in EO, Minnesota, if you don't know what it is, Entrepreneurs Organization, a great group of entrepreneurs, founders getting together to help each other. I had Matt Zulk, who's in EO Tulsa, and he talked about growing his company, Key Renter, and EO Nashville, Robert Hartline. He talked about growing a chain of actually cell phone stores from scratch to over $100 million. And also he has a software company as well. Talked about that journey. And EO Chicago member Rafi Arbel of Market JD talked about how he grew his agency. He was a lawyer. He actually went on to get his MBA, and how he grew his agency that helps lawyers. So those are all interesting. Check them out on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution around the podcast. Luke, we call ourselves the magic elves that work in the background to make it look easy for the host and the company so that they can create great content and amazing relationships. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. And I met Luke at one of the conferences actually in Entrepreneurs Organization. I'm like, Luke, you must come on my podcast to talk about what you're doing. He's got a really interesting, crazy story, even from traveling around the world to how he started his company. So we're going to get into that. But if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com to learn more. And I was saying, I'm excited to introduce Luke Komiskey. He's the founder and CEO of DataDrive. You can find him at godatadrive.com. And DataDrive is a data consulting firm providing managed analytic services. Well, we'll talk about what that means. And DataDrive helps growing mid-sized organizations transform their data into insights, which is the most important. What do you do with your data? How do you make decisions with your data, right? Because it's all there, but we need to provide action and insight. So that's what they help people do and organizations do. They have an ongoing partnership with companies to provide both the data platform and the team for delivering the faster and informed decisions. And over the last 7 years, Luke's grown DataDrive into a worldwide team of highly skilled professionals serving over 150 organizations. They've worked with organizations from healthcare to public school systems to manufacturing to software companies and more. Luke, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Fantastic introduction.
So just talk for a little bit. We'll dig into what you do a little bit, but just tell people a little bit more about DataDrive and what you do.
Yeah, DataDrive, like you mentioned, we are a data analytics consultancy, but really specialized around that whole concept of managed analytics services. And the whole idea of that is organizations are very familiar with collecting data, entering data, bringing on new applications within their business to bring that data and have their people input data into everything about their business process. But what most companies struggle with is, what are we doing with all of this data, and how is it actually driving informed insights and faster decision making for how we are going to go to market? And so what we really help organizations with is business leaders who are trying to figure out how to make sense of what they've been collecting over the year. Can it be brought together? We are the easy button for being able to bring on an experienced data team that already has experience setting up these end-to-end systems and how to analyze and pull interesting insights out of your data. That we bring all of that through a managed service that provides that ongoing support to help grow the internal skill sets, but also manage all of the data moving around between these disparate systems within companies.
Well, let's talk about an example so we can kind of just get some clarity for people, because, you know, we all have data and we all want to have more insights and action. You helped a media agency. Talk about some of the things you did there.
Yeah. So
I've had a lot of agencies on the podcast, so they'll be interested to hear what you did with this media agency.
Yeah. Yeah, media and marketing agencies, are definitely great examples of companies that have a lot of disparate data that's sitting out in various systems. If you think about how the operations run of digital media that sits in things like Facebook and LinkedIn and Google Ads, all the way to traditional media about how radio and TV spots are bought or how a billboard has any kind of advertising on it. All of that is data that sits in very different systems, either because the vendor is running that system, or your team is having to active buys and the real results and outcomes of that data. And for a media company, a media marketing agency is a big part of that is being able to share that story of when I spend $1 of marketing with your organization, that I get hopefully more than $1 of value back from it. And so media marketing agencies leverage us to piece together all of these disparate data sources, take all the planned data, all the actual spend, all the impressions that are gained from it, and being able to tell a story of the marketing value that their clients are getting from their services. But even more specifically for leaders that are running their own agency, is think about all the time that your team is having to spend stuck within Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets trying to manually create this on a monthly, weekly, ongoing basis. Imagine if you could automate that story and be able to share that almost real time with your customers. That's where the value of our service comes.
So a lot of times, and if you're listening to the audio, there's a video piece, and we're looking at GoDataDrive.com. You can see here's their website, but the case studies, one of them is a media company. I know you help a lot of media companies, but they can actually use it as a way, like from a sales perspective and a marketing perspective, because they may not know exactly, they go, we know we're getting results. We know we're getting a certain times, whatever, ROAS or certain return on spend, but we don't know exactly what that is. And you help them figure that out. That's one example, I guess, of how they figure it out. And they use that in their marketing and sales.
Yeah. So, two different ways, right? You can either gain the efficiencies of not having to have a team manually pull all this data and piece together for weekly, monthly presentations. There's a time savings element of it.
So they may use it with their current clients also.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So not just from a sales and marketing, hey, this is what we get, but maybe they have a monthly meeting with their clients and they don't want to have to pull all the data, and you basically do it, give them a nice presentation, and they're off to the races, and they can just focus on the client.
Yeah, and it's incredibly self-service that these teams can actually pull presentations at any given time without anyone from our side having to support that. The data is constantly being flowing in, that it removes all of that manual intervention of data that so many organizations kind of build entire teams around the copy and pasting of data. But I think the second piece that we've actually seen a lot more, particularly over the last 2 years, is this concept of data monetization. So organizations are recognizing that they're sitting on a gold mine of insights of, whatever their business model may be, but there's value for their community, whether it's vendors, partners, external customers, that you can even create value add services of, let me provide interesting insights to you to make better decisions. And there's new revenue streams within that type of data monetization that, particularly media agencies and marketing agencies can absolutely take advantage of.
So an example of that may be if agency serves like an e-commerce niche or something like that, and they can then pull all their data and maybe do a white paper of some sort of, here's what we have found of the best, I'm making this up, but the best actual terms to advertise for if you're an e-commerce company or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, and that both touches on something you could sell to an existing customer or even use as a sales tool during new prospect conversations of, look at the percent lift that we were able to give to this other customer, and you can experience that same thing and see real-time updates of that through our reporting offering.
So, but you'll also, it sounds like you'll set up a platform for them that they can constantly use. So it's not like they have to call you every time they need to pull a report.
Yeah, that's the beauty of what we provide is this concept of self-service analytics. So we are, as you can think of us, as like data Sherpas behind the scenes that are helping data move from point A to point B and providing that data cleansing, data transformation, the injecting a little bit of your business logic into how you and your organization look at data. But at the end of the day, we aren't position ourselves to be a report factory. We want to provide unlimited access to the data that you have been collecting, but in a more digestible format so that your business users, your customers will never have to write a line of SQL to try to access their data. They can use click and drag tools to instantly build charts, dashboards, reports that they can self-serve without having to necessarily scale up a bunch of headcount to support all of these new data capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I could see as a leader, as a team, how dashboards can be super powerful. What are some other use cases that people use? So that's one where they can use it to, present to their clients. What are some other use cases of how people are using the data to create a dashboard or insights?
Yeah, I mean it's a very like dependent on each organization and like the type of insights they're looking at.
Yeah,
Like I
maybe in
mentioned,
an agency, like, are there any others from an agency perspective, how they're using data?
yeah. So like outside of just externally reporting how advertising is creating a lift within the customer's business, there's also the internal analysis piece that often isn't done as an agency that says, are we making the best decision for our customers on how we are allocating their spend, right? You think about just the media mix and how they're deciding on which channels to use, which markets to go into. There is a ton of data that is historically sitting out there about what has worked, the seasonality of that, the year over year performance of that unless you have somebody that is going into all of these individual systems and pulling multiple years of data, you'll never be able to see those insights really easily. And so I think there's a ton, especially for agencies, to be able to look internally and say, are we doing the best spend that we possibly can be? Are there ways that we can negotiate with whatever vendor to say we can achieve better, just even internal efficiency by knowing what works and what doesn't from a channel perspective?
So, Luke, I could see how it would work with an agency. But I know you also work with school districts. So how would a school district actually use this?
Yeah. What I love about data is that it really transcends like any industry, that everyone has data. That I could go on and on about, different ways that organizations can take advantage of their data. But I've personally found the school district use case incredibly interesting, because if you think about a school district, they've got, in a typical district, they've got district staff, they've got individual schools that are like principals and school staff. And then if you think about the frontline employees, the frontline workers are the teachers that are day in and day out educating the future of our country. And all of them have very different goals and what they're trying to achieve. Like a district staff, a superintendent is making promises and presenting to the public about what are the outcomes we're going to drive, whether increased testing scores, better just delivery of educational outcomes. There's a lot of different ways that districts are having to measure that. And then if you go to the flip side of that with a teacher, you've got teachers that have already incredibly, busy schedules, limited time. But imagine that right before a class is about to start, they're able to go in and view insights about how this class of 20, 30 people that are about to enter this room are performing in math, in reading, and being able to easily see, are they showing up on time? Are they having disciplinary actions? Is there a trend in how these like testing scores, to figure out, are there particular students that I can pay closer attention to? Or is there kind of a broader way that I could approach this class differently because I've got real-time insights that I can look at 5 minutes before a class is about to start?
How do you educate the school system to actually look at this stuff or gain access? Like, how do they, like, if a teacher, does the school train them? How does it work? Because like you're doing this amazing work, and then ultimately everyone has to kind of even know it exists in the first place. How do they
Yeah.
disseminate the information so people can actually use it?
Yeah. And
I
what's
mean,
cool about the schools that we've worked with is that there's already that natural demand there of people are already piecing together their own Excel spreadsheets of trying to get those types of insights into how their district is doing or how their classes are performing. But I think another benefit of really what we provide with managed analytics services is not only plugging in the platform that's combining these, multiple systems and bringing together student data from all different places. So that's the platform piece, but the other piece is we provide that ongoing support. And so what that looks like can be different for different organizations, but it can be report development, it can be business analysis, and then another one that many companies take advantage of from our services is just ongoing doctor's hours and trainings. So being able to have an open time for teachers or district staff to be able to come in and ask questions of what else could we be doing with our data? Because to your point, not everyone is thinking in terms of how can I use data to make my job easier, but they all fundamentally have questions about, how can I be more efficient in the role that I'm doing? And so having a space for people to be able to ask that question through formal doctor's hours or shared channels that they have with us, we can help translate that into a data-driven insight that they can find with the reporting platform that we're hosting for them.
I know this is a very kind of granular question, but so I'm a teacher. Is there like something I log into to get that? Like, how do I actually access the data and insights?
Yeah. There's either the main reporting platform, one that we use and have been a heavy partner of for years has been Tableau, which is an industry-leading data visualization self-service platform. So many of our organizations take advantage of Tableau's existing platform that is available through the browser to be able to log in. What's great about those platforms is that, for many organizations that have, the application management, it is a single sign-on into being able to see those reports. But another thing that we do provide is being able to create white labeled reporting portals or reporting experiences. And so imagine you could go to portal.godatadrive.com, which is a real link, to be able to check out or be able to log in to the Insights portal and then easily find content that's specific to your role, and make that a frictionless experience on being able to find insights quickly, because especially within schools, very limited time. And so we want to make the fastest way we can deliver insights directly to them.
It sounds like from an onboarding perspective, like to them, it shows up, oh, there's this magic thing that I log into. What does it look like for you as a company though? Because you must have to pull data from like all these random fragmented sources.
Yes.
Maybe test scores over here, then maybe this over. I don't know. What does it look like in the onboarding process to create this type of solution?
Yeah, for any organization we bring on, and school districts are the same. It's building out an inventory of what are the business questions or like analysis that they're looking to do, and understanding where is that data logged today. And for us, it's identifying the application ecosystem. And so for most companies, it isn't just one source that rules them all, and that's the challenge that most organizations have with building an analytics platform. Is like my data sitting all over the place in a CRM and an ERP and a spreadsheet randomly. And so during that discovery and implementation process that we do for setting up that reporting platform is understanding, is there a student information system? Is there state assessment scores? Is there some kind of attendance log that we're able to tap into? And our secret sauce as a data company is being able to build out custom connectors and overall just kind of what we call ELT and data warehousing solutions, so that we can monitor that data coming in and out and alert everyone if anything breaks or anything changes, and be able to fix that without people needing to, I guess, appreciate all the complexity behind the scenes. Like, our goal is to kind of make it look like magic that this data shows up in one place, but there is a lot of work behind the scenes to make sure that this concept of a student ID matches across multiple systems. That isn't easy, and that's where we come in to make that seamless.
Talk about, as a company, usually when people start off with a company, it's not the niche they serve and the people they serve is not what it ends up, right? So talk about the evolution of niche. Like when you first started, what did the clients look like, and then how did it evolve to what it is now?
So when I first started DataDrive, it was really like that first year. If we go way back, that first year was me being an experienced data consultant and transitioning into data freelancing life. And for me, it was leaning in on network and referrals to find whoever wanted data help, and I could somewhat scope out a project on how we could help. We would serve them. And really over the course of like the first half of DataDrive's life, it continued to be that of.
What type of companies were coming to you, or you're finding were attracted to what you're doing?
Yeah, it was all over the place. I had a manufacturer that did a lot of like wedding invitations and notebooks. I had big Fortune 500 companies like General Mills that was taking advantage of tools like Tableau to be able to dig into their various insights across like CPG data sources. It had healthcare companies for like population management and trying to measure health outcomes. And so like what I found during that first half is like we were building a lot of fantastic data products, but every piece of that required me or my team to have to like build up in just a high level enough
Very custom
understanding of what what insights they needed. And so as part of just like the evolution, I think as me as an entrepreneur and also just recognizing like how difficult it is to both like scale the cool products that we're building, but also an understanding of like what are the unique challenges within the organization is really where I've like leaned in on niching down, because I think it's easier to market to, it's easier to sell, it's easier to build products, because many times 50-60% of that work can kind of be done because it's the same system, it's the same metrics. Everyone, especially, I mean, all companies are like this, but especially in school districts, I think at the end of the day, school districts are all trying to measure the same thing based around student outcomes. There's only so many ways you can cut and slice that, and everyone's data sources are generally about the same, and they're just looking to answer the same questions. And so, yeah, like to your point, when I started DataDrive, I would have never imagined 7 years later that I'd be talking about school district analytics. It's been just one of those where one lead comes in and you put a little effort into marketing and you find a few more, that it's been easier for me to have conversations about what a school district challenges are, what their pain points are, and on the delivery side to make it really streamlined for us to know exactly what applications to ask for and go after and deliver that in record time. And I think it's a benefit to our customers as well as a benefit to our like ability to be efficient as a business. And it's been a cool learning, but unfortunately it took me 7 years to get there.
That's great. I want to talk about the evolution of the services themselves too. You said you started off with some services and then talk about, how it evolved to now.
Yeah. So when I first started, I came from a consulting background, and really like all I knew from my former consulting background is that we would go to really large companies, often responding to RFPs, and put together like fixed scope engagements, or even just like hourly consulting engagements. And so if you think about some of our bigger companies we worked with, they would sign up to take X number of people for 40 hours a week for the next 2 quarters. And the way to deliver that and the way to sell that is pretty like well understood, right? This is pre-COVID. I've got a lot of local Minnesota consultants driving into an office every day, literally spending 9 to 5 at an office, like essentially a full-time employee at that company, but under the banner of DataDrive. And part of the evolution of those services is recognizing that like one, to scale that type of operation requires more people going into more offices all the time. And from the operation side of it, it means that you've got more people that need to be sold on more projects at more companies. And so that for me, it was like that scaling part of it, really tough. And then you throw in a global pandemic that we can talk about, like that completely flips the formula on going into the office and like what are expectations on like how work is delivered.
Talk about that for a second. So typical engagement, you said pre-COVID, people are going in, then what does it look like post-COVID?
Yeah. And like when I started the consultancy, like my big like pitch to people was like, you can be a consultant and not have to go to the airport. Because so many people are just trying to get off the road. And then now you throw in a global pandemic where not going to an airport is kind of table stakes for doing a job. And even for our customers, they didn't want us in the office. And so like we were able to actually win a lot of new work by just being top of mind, because you're literally sitting within the cubicles to win that additional work. And so for me, it's like the way we sold, the way we could kind of rely on new leads, the way that we could pitch the value to our existing employees and new employees completely changed. And yeah, I mean, I think it was like during that time is where I really started to look into more of like, what are ways that you can kind of scale an organization that doesn't require a kind of 1-for-1 match of a customer needing somebody full-time in the office and an employee expecting or wanting to even go into an office for 40 hours a week. Like there's a complete mismatch of that.
You touched on this a little bit, but how have you found to attract top talent? Because you're working with large organizations, right? And I mean, one is obviously a selling point. You don't have to travel all the time. But what are some other ways that you've been able to attract top talent to your company?
Yeah, for us, a big part of our success has been leaning in on like technology partnerships. I mentioned Tableau earlier, and what's been great about our growth is that uh, I understand the Tableau ecosystem. I know how to sell through partnerships, and so what's great for top talent to be interested throughout the lifespan of DataDrive is we have always been able to find the most interesting, challenging ways to use certain types of software. So it's easier to find people that understand and are excited to use that type of software and be able to be challenged across multiple different companies. I think the biggest value that people get into just, whether it's consulting or any kind of agency is you get the opportunity to be exposed to many different organizations. And so you can often find really hungry people that want to experience different organizations, but be comfortable within a technology, become an expert in the technology to be able to drive that type of growth. And I think also like pre-COVID, being able to offer a consultancy that didn't require you having to leave your family life and go off and live in a hotel was a huge value add of how I was able to get really talented people that wanted to do interesting work, but didn't want to be away from their family.
Did that help? I mean, so pre-COVID, the expectation for these companies, like we want FaceTime. So the expectation shifted a lot after COVID. That has that come back at all, or how's
Yeah,
that
I
been
think
affected?
I think people in general are hungry for in-person interactions. I mean, the level isn't nearly what it was pre-COVID. The expectations, especially like I'm in the data space, I think so much of what we do is just naturally online. And so I think a lot of the great data talent really doesn't have a reason to have to go into an office. And so I think there's just an understanding that, hey, I can do my job from the comfort of my home. And for me, that's what I've leaned in on building a remote virtual culture now. From our clients' perspective, I think what's interesting now is we work with companies that we never meet in person. People ask like, how often do you go into their office? And I'm like, I mean, there's been clients that we've worked with 3-4 years at this point that we've actually never met outside of a Zoom call. Uh, and I think it's nice if when we're able to travel and see them in person. I think that's a huge still value add, and like ways that I'm trying to figure out how do you safely kind of insert that back into normal life because people are hungry for the face to face interactions. But I found that for the work that we do, it's actually opened up how like pre-COVID, I would say 80% of my business happened in Minnesota, and now 80% of my business happens outside of Minnesota. Like it's just that big of a flip.
Talk about remote culture for a second, and what do you do to maintain a remote culture?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I found is it's first of all finding people that have either experienced remote culture life or understand what they're signing up for. I think one of the things that, as especially like during these like first 1 or 2 years where like everyone was doing remote work, is it's kind of the same thing I experienced as a freelancer. Is it's fun and a novel experience for the first like 6 to 12 months, but I think after that you start to find out whether your personality or work style or even like your life situation is really set up for success to do remote work. So the biggest things that like I think about is to provide a strong remote virtual culture is to really lean in on like flexibility and not having expectations around, being your Slack green from 9 to 5 every day. And I think for the people that are on our team, the ability to just leave for kids events or to not that you're on at every point during the business hours is a huge value add, but it takes certain personalities that can be able to kind of flip on and flip off. And so I think the biggest thing for me about building remote culture is building a culture that is more based around results and outcomes versus time in front of a computer. And I think that can be a big shift, especially for consultancies and agencies that are like, still very built around the billable hour. You're trying to measure time in a world where like you have no idea what people are doing at their home offices. And you can kind of see that now. People are trying to get people back to these expensive offices. And I think for talented data people, if you can offer an environment where like, I don't actually really care when you work, I care about what you get done. I think that can be really appealing for some of the top talent out there.
I want to go to Luke. I mentioned in the very beginning about, there was a point where you just traveled the world. You went to 28 countries. I think you and your wife quit your job, sold everything, and traveled. What were some of the learnings why did you do that in the first place? What possessed you to do that? And then we'll talk about some of the learnings.
So a big thing for me in my life, just in general, is like, I want to live a great story. And for me, I kind of view my story as these like ongoing, interesting chapters where I'm learning more about myself and just growing as a person. I've always had a little bit of travel in my life through like high school. And then even in college, my now wife and I both studied abroad during the same semester, but she was in Australia and I was in Greece. So we had a long distance relationship, but we, didn't experience the world together. And so for everything that I kind of do in life, I always look at people that are just kind of that next stage in life, whether it's like 5 or 10 years ahead of me, and just like understand what are those, like, I don't know, regrets or things that they wish they would have taken advantage of. And a common one I heard when I get to that life stage of like the mid-20s was, I wish we would have traveled more, because like travel with kids is just different, or it takes a long time to get back to that stage where like travel is the same as like having it with kids, because you need them to be old enough to, not have a bunch of, special setups to make that happen. And so my wife and I very much took that to heart. We, now have 2 kids, but this trip happened in 2016. And we're at this point where like, I think we were both doing really well in our careers, and there was every reason not to leave, but we knew that every day we stayed would be just another reason to just like stay on the track that we were on. And so I'm not quite sure what possessed us to like make that decision finally. I mean, I remember that night vividly of like buying the one-way ticket to Tokyo and being like, all right, like now we're gonna have to quit our jobs and here we go. But I am so thankful for doing that experience, because one, now that I have kids, if you don't have kids and are listening to this, please travel before you have them, because it is different. And second of all, I think I owe so much about how like my personality is today. I think my tolerance for taking risk and actually, living a life where I can kind of like, I can plan out what I want to do and really own that script versus having a professional job tell me what that script is going to be. That year of 2016 is really where like my entrepreneurial fire really started up. I knew that I needed to start making some moves that have led to who I am today. And so very thankful for doing that.
What were some of the memorable moments along the trip that you still think back on and learn from?
Yeah, the 2 that come to mind is one, I loved absolutely like our favorite country was New Zealand. My wife and I are huge outdoor fanatics, and the way we tackled that was just so fun and interesting, because for 2 weeks, we rented a Toyota Corolla. We went to a Walmart equivalent to buy $100 worth of camping gear, Salvation Army to pick up some warm clothes. And for 2 weeks, we were like living out of a car, putting up a tent at night, or if it was raining, we would like sleep inside the vehicle. And I remember just like one night in particular, it was just raining hard. We had to park at a golf course. I had cooked instant noodles under the awning at the golf course. I remember that so much, because I think about how fun and free and kind of like just like stress free I felt in that space, that anytime like now in my life where I just get really stressed out or worked up or like unsure about what is like the negative consequence that's going to happen, I'm like, if I found happiness by like being instant noodles and a golf course in New Zealand, like I think I've already lived like the worst outcome, and I was incredibly free and happy in that moment. So above everything, like between New Zealand and then like traveling in Southeast Asia, where there's just a whole new level of income disparity and just like how people live, but yet they find happiness, I think always gives me a reminder of like setting expectations of, I think it's easy to get stuck in this American dream of more, work harder, and to like really set expectations of, at the end of the day, we're all just humans trying to like make it work on this earth, and give perspective of, what it means to live a fulfilling life. And often that doesn't happen just by working really hard.
At what point, you said you bought the one-way ticket. At what point do you decide, okay, I think this trip is coming to an end here?
So I'm a numbers guy. I know you'd be surprised by this, but
very surprised.
Yeah.
You're so like I had this whole dashboard built that. No.
I mean, I did. And So we like had our down payment on our house. That's what we used instead of getting our first house. We just used that as our travel funds. And for me, I had this fancy spreadsheet behind the scenes that was just tracking every single expense. And my goal, after reading a few travel blogs, was I want to travel for the whole year for $50 a day per person. And so every single expense was always just tracking this main KPI of $50 a day. You go to places like Japan, you go to places like Australia, you go to places like Western Europe, that metric runs really hot. And then you go to places like Southeast Asia or Eastern Europe, and now that number starts to go down. So I knew that with our funds that we would be able to last until Thanksgiving of 2016, and that is exactly when we came back. So I always kind of knew our numbers. I knew what we were trying to plan for. And honestly, I think about 11 months on the road of being unemployed, we were ready to come back. Now I'm ready to leave again, but we were ready to come back at that point.
Oh, talk about learnings in the relationship, right? You're with your wife. You're in a vehicle for 2 weeks, living out of a vehicle, a closed space. What were some of the learnings relationship wise?
Yeah, it was one of the coolest experience ever. Like I would recommend as like the ultimate marriage test is spend over 11 months with every waking moment with your spouse. Because through thick and thin, you find yourself in stressful situations. You find yourself hungry, trying to find food. I mean, we experienced everything that to the point of like you have lunch or dinner with your significant other, and you're usually talking about like what happened in your day or who said something. But like imagine for 11 months, you're sharing every single memory that there's like nothing to talk about because you guys both experienced it together. And yeah, it was amazing for our marriage just being able to like I guess just experience life with, and we were relatively like newlyweds, so just be able to like experience life through that lens together was like our first really big like shared experience and something that we can always come back to and talk about. So yeah, I loved everything about that, and it truly did strengthen the relationship because I mean you have no choice. They're your travel buddy. You have to work out everything in real time. Where I think like in normal life you can kind of just go off and do your own thing and not get down to the core things you need to be talking about.
Yeah. Look, thanks for sharing that. I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to just point people to check out godatadrive.com to learn more. They have some great resources there that you can check out. But Luke, my last question is just mentors. That could be books, that could be actual people. Who are some of the mentors that have influenced your business journey?
Yeah, I mean, I have to start by giving just a shout out to the Entrepreneurs Organization, of course, the one that you mentioned at the beginning, because for me, I felt like I was learning and figuring out things pretty well on my own, but until I found Entrepreneurs Organization and realized that people are thinking about it just very differently and just kind of giving me new ideas to think about. These mentors have been specifically for like my forum. And so within EO, you've got a group of people that you're meeting with on a monthly basis. Uh, my forum in particular has been with me through the thick and thin of just like figuring out both like personal things as well as my own professional journey and helped me, I guess, think differently about what I'm trying to get out of my life, what I'm trying to get out of my business. And it's really like been instrumental about what like the learnings and the pivots that I get an opportunity to talk about today during this time together. Um, another one that stands out to me is just in particular is our old managing director from a consulting company right before I started DataDrive. Uh, really like had no reason because for as far as he know, like I was a great employee that left to go travel the world and never came back. Uh, and he was instrumental during my first year of consulting because I had no clue what I was doing. This guy would help me review master services agreements, help me figure out how to write up like a statement of work myself, and just was incredibly supportive about helping me find success when it really is like there was no gain for him outside of just helping me. And so I think about him a lot just because it has really helped me set up for success and always like I very much subscribe to that, once you make it to the top, like got to send the elevator back down. And yeah, I think he's just been a really good mentor. And like as I'm talking about him, I'm realizing it's been a while since I've said hi to him. So you might have inspired me.
What do you think motivated him to help? Like you said, there's no gain on his part necessarily, but like besides just the good deed of helping.
Yeah. I kind of view it like he had found so much success in consulting. He was really just like the highest you could go at that level within the firm. And I think for him, it was just a way of like, he's got a lot of interesting knowledge. And I kind of joined that firm at a time where I owe a lot about how I sell and how I think about, positioning services and how I think about uh, the metrics of running a consultancy. Like I learned that by just joining meetings with him and just like osmosis those ideas. So I think for him, it's just like once you kind of figured it out, and I don't know if he has it all figured out, but I think is just a great opportunity for him to, give back. And like, even now when I reflect on just everyone I know in the entrepreneurs organization, like the reason why I go to these events and, meet up with people like you, Jeremy, is the most random stories and shared experiences that people provide, like completely like unlock a new way of thinking for me. And I love hanging out in the same rooms with people and just kind of seeing what comes out. It's a really cool feeling.
What about from a book's perspective? I'm looking over your shoulder there. I see some books under the plant there. I don't know if those are some of your favorites, but what are some favorite books that you enjoy?
Yeah, the latest one, I'm probably going to butcher the title, but we'll see if we get it right. The Gap in the Gain
Sure.
has
Yeah.
been
Benjamin Hardy and Dan
yeah.
Sullivan.
Yeah, that's been just an incredible book. I think finding me at the right time, because I think so much of going through a business pivot is you think about all the things that you didn't think about the first time, like the gap of what you should have done. And I think helping me think about how much I've gained now to be able to make those decisions has like put me just better mentally in a good spot, and just very appreciative. That book just like found me at the right time. Uh, Yeah, I mean, the other things that I like really subscribe to as well is EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System. Traction is kind of their main book, but they've got many in the Gino Wickman library. That has been really helpful for me, taking it from a scrappy freelance operation to like growing up with a pretty simple system, but hard to execute if you're not committed. But that's helped me get to new heights about building something that can live beyond me and an actual asset versus just, Luke creating a job out of being a freelancer.
Yeah, and check. There was an interview I did with Gino Wickman. You could check that out. He's the author of Traction and several other books, and also Mark Winters, who co-authored with Gino Wickman Rocket Fuel. That's also a really good interview and good book as well. You have it right there.
Yeah, that's the orange book right up here.
Oh, cool. So check those out. Luke, I wanted to be the first one to thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey, your knowledge, your lessons. Everyone can check out GoDataDrive.com to learn more, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast. This episode is powered by Rise 25. Please subscribe and check out future episodes.